Texans need running backs. We know that. We've talked about this a lot. Austin Ekeler is a polarizing topic. Shout out to the 33rd team. They put out a graphic of Austin Ekeler. It had the internet going nuts in Houston. So we'll get into this. Latest edition of Sign or Decline. We've talked about Derrick Henry. We've talked about Josh Jacobs. We've talked about Saquon Barkley. Austin Ekeler. Should the Texans sign Austin Ekeler?
You got to consider it. You got to think about this type of guy that 2 years ago was a dynamic player, 3 years ago was a dynamic player. And yeah, this past season stunk for him. I mean, he led the league in receiving rushing touchdowns 2 years in a row, and then he had 6 total touchdowns this past year. So prime for a bounce back is kind of the thought process if you're interested in Austin Ekeler, but he can't be the only guy. But that's a good thing because he's not going to cost like a Saquon Barkley or a Josh Jacobs that would be one of those primary 1A guys. Like Ekeler is a complement to something else with the running back room. And if you told me it's Austin Ekeler and another running back as the running back room, you start to kind of have a vision for how that running back room could be a productive room for this Texans team that just has to get better at running the football.
Yeah, my thing is this, like, what do you want? What do they want from their running backs? Like, what do they want? Like, if you're just saying, like, is this guy going to be the guy that you hand the ball to 20 times and he gets, how many ever hard-earned yards? He's probably, like, way back on the list. But do they want a guy who can do a lot of things? The scheme fit stuff comes up, and there's a lot of fake internet people and really a lot of fake media types that talk about scheme fit. I think a lot of times when we talk about scheme fit, it's usually just based on when people talk about it, from my experience, what they've done versus what this team does. It's not based on how their skill set actually fits this squad. So I wonder how they look at Austin Ekeler. And my most important question, I want to pose this to you, Cody. It's the latest edition of Sign or Decline here with Landry Locker of the Locker Room, Cody Stoots channel. And he's going to, by the way, he's getting on a plane, I think, right after we record this. And he's going to Indianapolis. So he's going to be at the Combine. Who's in charge of this running back thing for the Texans? And the reason I bring this up because there's two things that like stick out when it comes to them getting in a room and talking about this. Number one, how much say does Bobby Slowick have now compared to last year? Like, I think Bobby Slowick might almost be able to individually pick the running back who's going to be here. And number two, how much does Nick Caserio have to say about this? Because if they were running that same janky-ass system that they were running with Bill O'Brien and Tim Kelly and all that, I think Austin Ekeler would be a perfect fit. Like, I think Austin Ekeler, like in old school New England days, would be like a perfect fit at running back for them.
Yeah.
Which makes me wonder, like, does Nick Caserio look at that and say, man, because you did it for 2 decades. I know it's a different system. I know that he's become more open-minded. I know it's different guys, but this does seem like based on like what the overwhelming majority of Nick Caserio's life has been in evaluating running backs, this does seem like the type of guy that Nick Caserio would just completely fall in love with.
It's one of those weird things. What you just brought up is kind of like if you're in a new relationship and your last relationship liked having pasta for dinner, but this new relationship doesn't like pasta for dinner, you can't keep cooking pasta for them. But every now and then they might like a pasta dish. Maybe that's Ekeler for this situation. Maybe it's like, hey, we really wouldn't usually pursue a guy like this for how a Shanahan-style tree offense would work. But one thing that they didn't do as much in this past year's offense that I expected a little bit more of was throw the ball to the running backs. And San Francisco,
he's perfect at that. Like that's elite right there.
San Francisco throws the ball to the backs, and I felt like Bobby Slowick was going to have that as a part of his offense, and it just wasn't as prevalent as I expected it to be. So if Eckler's in the conversation, if you are sitting down as Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson and figuring out and kind of sort of charting the offense for the next couple of years, Eckler's the perfect guy for throwing the ball. But, I mean, as far as what they typically have or maybe what they ideally have in that Shanahan style of offense, that's not really that type of guy. He's a complement to someone else. The days of Austin Ekeler, the number one running back, are over.
It's Cody Stoots. I'm Landry Locker. So the case for Ekeler, it's really, I mean, I don't know that there's like a real strong case, like based on the other running backs, like as far as like my case, I wonder, like maybe Bobby has something up his sleeve and maybe Bobby thinks that he can kind of gel. I do think like if you bring in Saquon or you bring in Josh Jacobs or you bring in Derrick Henry, you're not necessarily thinking about like a perfect recipe and a perfect like backfield. Those are basically like workhorses, and you're going to have other guys. For Ekeler, I think if you bring him in, you're going to have to think about like how you can fill his weaknesses and fill that type of void.
He's not the one. He's not the one guy. I mean, he's a guy that you bring in as a compliment, but he's probably one of the better complement style guys, especially if the other running back is more of a between the tackles, take care of business, get hard yards. And then Ekeler comes in as that change of pace as another guy that you could throw the ball to. And you're also betting on the bounce back too. Like the argument for Austin Ekeler and the case for him is last year was an anomaly. Yes, he's a little bit older, but that was a weird Chargers team that it seems like the players didn't believe in the coach. The quarterback was hurt basically all year. The offensive line was banged up basically all year. He wasn't 100% healthy. So you're betting on the bounce back, and the bounce back is one of the more dynamic pass catching running backs over the past 4 or 5 years in the National Football League. I mean, this is a guy that can easily get you 1,200 yards from scrimmage over the course of a season, even as a compliment back to somebody else. So that's part of the case too is, hey, you can excuse away some of the stuff that happened last year where he had a really, really, really bad year compared to what he had done. And you could say he's in a better situation with us. And so that's why we're going to invest in him and make him a part of the running back room.
Yeah, he's a polarizing topic because I'm sure that he's won a lot of people fantasy leagues, and I'm sure he's kind of lost a lot of people fantasy leagues. It's kind of like a David Johnson type of thing where with the points per reception, I think sometimes you can get kind of blinded by it. I play fantasy football. I'm in a competitive league. You're in the same league that I've been in. So it's kind of it's kind of just like a real competitive like situation where people have polarizing opinions about Austin Ekeler. The case against, I think you've kind of laid it out nicely. The system fit, what they want, etc. I think the case against Austin Ekeler, I don't think he fits this system. And I'm not a system fit guy. I don't like transition the what he was doing with the Chargers to here. But I don't think that he fits here, and I'm not a scout or anything like that. I don't think it really fits.
The scary part for me is the efficiency across the board for Austin Ekeler was the worst of his career. The worst yards per carry, the worst catch percentage, the worst success rate, which is positive rushes from the running back spot. And you think about like, okay, he had a rough year. You could excuse some of it away, but if he's not efficient in what we believe would be a role where it's a little bit of a diminished role compared to what he's had the past few seasons, all of a sudden, if you find out in the early days of the season that, hey, this guy just isn't efficient anymore because he doesn't have the juice or he can't cut or something's missing from his game just because Father Time got to him quicker than everybody else, then that would be a really scary spot to be in, because if he's on the team, you've clearly identified and carved out a role for him. And then one other thing about Austin Ekeler that bothers me, and this has nothing to do with his game, but you've mentioned it, it's the fantasy football stuff. He's very aware of his usefulness and involvement in fantasy football. He's one of the players.
And I actually love it because he actually tries really hard at the end of the season.
Sure, I get that. But man, when you're having a really unproductive year and he's doing a fantasy show every week, it just kind of, I'm not saying these guys can't do stuff outside of football, but it just rubbed me the wrong way last year as like this guy's struggling to get 100 yards a game. And then he's like, hey, by the way, like that'd be a great pickup for you in your league. And it's like, okay, sure, Austin Ekeler.
Embraces it.
You have your worst year in the NFL when all of a sudden you have a bunch of extra stuff that you're doing that's not football. Like you wonder and you start to think, could that have affected the on-field play? And maybe I'm stretching it a little too far on that, but it just kind of, it rubbed me the wrong way.
You're not. And the other thing about this, though, as we talk about Austin Ekeler, and we'll get the verdict in a second, is like I heard Greg Roman talk the other day, and Greg Roman said, imagine Justin Herbert with a run game. And for me, that's basically like a direct shot at Austin Ekeler. So that means that his current team doesn't value him. Like Greg Roman, the new offensive coordinator for Jim Harbaugh with the Chargers, he literally said, imagine Justin Herbert without a run game. So I do wonder, like we talked about this the other day when we talked about Hollywood Brown, and be sure to go back and check out that video, Sign to Climb, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots. Man, I do wonder, like, what is the market going to be for Austin Ekeler? Like, is there a situation where the Texans go through free agency, maybe they don't sign a running back, and then all of a sudden, like, you're getting Austin Ekeler for like 1 year, $5.5, $6 million, like Devin Singletary type of money? Like, has the market plummeted that much to where maybe Austin Ekeler suddenly becomes a bargain? Because obviously he's not going to demand what Saquon and Jacobs and all these guys are demanding. In the draft is very weak at running back, but like, is there a situation where maybe all this stuff we're saying is true about Austin Ekeler, but maybe the price and the market speaks to him, and he ends up just kind of falling in your lap?
I'd be surprised if he signed before the draft. This feels like the type of guy that a team brings in because free agency and the draft didn't exactly go the way that they wanted it to in the way that they thought that it was going to go. And so they turned to whoever's left in free agency, and boom, there's Austin Ekeler. And it also feels like if he does get signed prior to the draft, it's one of these teams that's not expecting to, be super competitive right away. And they're kind of using him to bridge to a rookie that they like or a younger player on the roster. So I'd be surprised to see him get anything of extreme note when it comes to his new contract with his next team, because it does not seem like there's any chance he's going back to the Chargers.
All right, so the verdict on Austin Ekeler, for me, it's a sideways. And the reason it's a sideways is because if you're telling me that I'm talking about Austin Ekeler versus Jacobs or the other guys, Jacobs, Barkley, Henry, I would say no. But I do wonder what the market's going to look like and if it's like somewhat of a bargain. So I would give a sideways thumb when it comes to Austin Ekeler in this edition of Sign or Decline.
I'm going to go decline. He's a thumbs down for me. And there's too many signs for me that he's cooked, and the productivity is not going to be there, and he's not going to be efficient when he gets the opportunity the way we would want him to be used, which is as a complement to another running back. So there's just too many red flags on him for me to be interested in him being a part of the running back room.
All right, sign or decline. Do you think the Texans should be considering signing Austin Ekeler? We're going to do this throughout the week. Cody Stoots is going to be at the Combine. I'm going to be on the radio. Keep it going. Keep it rolling. Locker Room, Cody Stoots channel, Houston football. Appreciate you for coming through. Do you think the Texans should sign or decline Austin Ekeler? Let us know.